Okay. I think we're live. So welcome to everybody. Oh, we've got a sixth person. Welcome to the virtual user group. Yes, my name is Tim, St. Paul Tim. I'm going to try and sit out of the glare if I can. And I'll be sharing my screen. Oh, we got a. So welcome to everybody. Oh, we got a. There we go. The live stream just started giving me feedback because I had that running, but I turned it off. So we're trying to do, oh, I don't know if the coffee, let's wait a second for the air jet to pass.
It's not loud.
There. Hopefully the background noise isn't too awful, but every once in a while here at the coffee shop, things get crazy. So we're trying to do these virtual user groups like the first Tuesday of each month, but we've not been super regular on that, but I'd like to get back on that schedule. I know we have a couple of topics lined up. Luke has an exciting topic proposed that we were hoping to talk about today, but we didn't, he needed a little more time. So we'll probably reschedule that. We were going to talk about importing and exporting data. And maybe at the end of the meeting, we can talk briefly if Luke wants to solicit any input on that, he could.
I was going to say we can foreshadow it a little bit, and you know I want to be able to present some findings, but I'm happy to take temperature for things before we get into that.
Well, let's do that as a coming soon attraction at the end of today. I think we'll have time. So we decided to just do something I've been wanting to do for a while, which was just sort of short talks on Contrib projects. And I think if there's time, we can just talk in general about Backdrop Contrib and how it's going. Oh, there goes another. How distracted? Can you hear the coffee machine really bad right now?
No? If it doesn't bother you, just talk through it.
Well,
I mean, it's audible, but it's not really that distracting, at least from here.
It's actually distracting for me. It's so loud.
Yeah.
Anyways, so the idea today was just to talk about some, invite folks to share some Contrib projects they're working on. And I know Peter is prepared to talk about one that he's been working on. I am planning to talk about something I've been working on that I think is going to introduce Luke and maybe interest Luke and maybe some other people. And I was also prepared to talk about configurable block styles, but Joseph is here, and I don't know if he wants to talk about that, or we could talk about that together because he was really the original author, and I've been just helping out with it. Peter, is it better for you to go first, or should I go first and then you, and then in case I do two, then I don't have to do them back to back?
Yeah, that's fine. I can wait.
Okay. I'm going to start out and talk about, just do a quick introduction to kind of an experimental thing I've been working on, which is, there's a topic in the core repo on like config recipes for Backdrop, something similar to features in Drupal. I have wanted the ability, I have a distribution and I work with a number of different clients, would like to work with more and would like the ability to just import a feature like the original features module was proposed in Drupal easily into another Backdrop site. From move one feature from another, and in theory, config management, it feels like should make that pretty easy because it's a batch of config files. But in the current sort of state of affairs, it's actually not that easy at all because you have to, in order to move like an FAQ feature, which consists of 4 or 5 config files from one site to another, you actually have to export the entire config. Hey, Gregory. Oh, we got a good turnout today. Looks like the control panel's telling me we got 7 people. So, Gregory, I'm just talking about this experimental Contrib project I've been working on, config batch management. And the goal, and anyways, so if I want to import just a small batch of config files, the current status in Drupal, the Backdrop core is that I can paste them in one at a time. Or I can export the entire site's config, add my config files to it, and then re-import it but to re-import it, you have to tarball it, and to tarball it, you have to tarball it in a very specific way. You can't include the directory that includes the config files in the tarball, or else it won't work. And so it's actually kind of cumbersome to try and just like, and so it's cumbersome to do the full export import. And if you try pasting them one at a time, that will cut, you're cutting and pasting them through the UI. And it has the other downside that you have to do them in the right order, where you don't if you do the batch config. If you're cutting and pasting them into the config, and for example, you have, let's say your batch contains a content type that has a unique view and a unique view instance. You can't put the view instance before the field, I'm sorry, if it has a content type and a custom field, and then you have a field instance. Each one of those has its own config file. You can't do the field instance before you do the field. And if you're not sort of, it might not be obvious to everybody which order you have to do them in. So I started out by creating a Contrib project. Oh, I should start sharing my screen.
While you do that, Tim,
Yep.
we already have issues in core for those problems that you mentioned. Like eventually they should be sorted, right?
Yep, all of these, we've opened, all of them have issues. Here we go. Are we seeing my screen yet? Yep,
Yes.
okay. Oops.
Yep.
Okay, the Zoom control panel just got in the way. One of the things I did a while back was just created a Contrib project that is not a module. It's just a Git repo with several experimental features, like an FAQ. And if you open the FAQ, it originally just had a text file, a README, and it had the three JSON files that go with that. And I included, I think, instructions. I think I got rid of that. So I opened in the README file, I think in the very first version of this, I actually like listed which, if you were going to cut and paste these into your site, which order to do them in. But that seemed really kind of cumbersome. So I do have a blog post and another video that kind of shows the process for doing, if you wanted to add this feature to your site, how you could do it using the full config process. But I wanted to like create a UI to be able to do this. And I'm not a hardcore coder, Contrib module writer from scratch. Most of the modules I work on, I'm sort of hacking on or helping other people. So this felt a little bit ambitious for me, but I just dug in and I found the code that we use to manage config files in core. And I created a module, which I'm calling config batch upload. For now, I'm not, I hope it's possible to change the name for that later. I'm not excited about the name. Anyways, and so basically and it's a very kind of fragile module, but it works right now. So excuse me, this is a, I spun up a site using my distribution. So this is used as the Tatsu theme, and I have config batch man, and it has a whole bunch of modules enabled or installed, a couple of them enabled in addition to core. I've enabled this batch config upload, and basically what it's doing right now is if we go to development, config management, is it adds a batch import tab or batch import option. So in addition to synchronized single import, full import, there's a batch import. And if this is still limited in that I can upload a batch of config, but they have to be tarballed together, and they have to be tarballed together in that without the directory, which is all kind of a nuisance, but it works. And so for somebody, part of the purpose of this the config recipes project was just to have some recipes that were available if anybody wanted to experiment with this idea. I don't know if these recipes are really that, going to be widely adapted, but they're at least here for us to use and to experiment with in building this feature. I went ahead and created tarballs that are just the JSON files for each of these features. So I have them ready. So now I can, if I've got batch import, I can say choose file. I can go to my desktop where I staged a download. I just downloaded and unzipped the config recipes project. And if I go into the FAQ and I select the FAQ tarball and I open it, basically my module is creating a temporary, or it clears out the staging directory in Backdrop. It dumps my config files into it. It pulls in the tarball, untarballs it, and then it just copies the entire active directory into that. And so if I hit stage and I cross my fingers, it is now showing me, it tries to do a sync, and it shows me the 3 new config files that I've added, and I can hit import all, and they should get imported. One of the other problems, well, there's a couple of issues that before this is super functional. I mean, like for my particular personal use case, it solves my problem today. I can use this for my own purposes pretty quickly and easily. But for it to have sort of broader appeal, I think, one, if my feature updates an existing config file, this process isn't going to handle that at all. It's assuming that these JSON config files are absolutely new. And what's the other big limitation? Oh, there's no dependencies. And again, there are feature or issues for these in the core issue queue. But if my config is dependent on say a module being enabled, that's not handled at all. There's no notification or anything like that. It doesn't check for that or tell you that. It just doesn't work. So those are 2 big things that I think I'd have to resolve for this to be really useful. But anyways, I wanted to share this project and the work I've been doing, partly to get feedback, to find out if other people think this is useful, and possibly to stimulate interest in other people helping with this. There's a repo for the config recipes, and I'd welcome if anybody wanted to create their own recipe and dump it in here. And there's also a repo in the Backdrop Contrib for config batch upload. So that's my quick talk on that. If anybody has any questions or thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them.
I have questions and thoughts.
Yeah.
Although before I hijack, let me say, awesome work, Tim. Very, very exciting. It raises so many possibilities for ways to use CMI. I want to try to focus my thoughts a little bit, and not over talk. One of the things that strikes me during the batch import, once things are in, there's no differentiation after they're imported, right? It becomes just part of the configuration.
Yes, that's true.
So I'm curious, kind of looking forward. I think for other reasons, Backdrop might stand for having some more structure internally, and I'm not sure how much I'm asking for, but I'm curious. Is there, of the objects that you import, is there a name for sort of like the individual pieces, like what they all are?
Right. I
just
think
objects, right? Like,
I don't think I was the first one to throw around the config recipes. Somebody else, I think, coined that term, and that kind of feels right to me, but I'm not 100% sure yet. I'd love to hear what other people think of that. Is, in Drupal, that would be a feature. And I would be open to using the term feature, because that actually is super definitive, but it's also confusing because it's not the same as what Drupal feature is.
Let me complete my thought, and then I'll back off, because what I would sort of see this as a step towards, and it's a step towards a very exciting goal from my perspective, is kind of having a modular arrangement of things within Backdrop, so that if you imported, an application, a feature, a fully realized concept, you could build something with, more than one of these, and you could track them so that you could add, a bulletin board and a FAQA and various things, and have within the interface those still remain distinct and identifiable, so you could turn them off or upgrade pieces of it and have some semblance of control, rather than having dozens, hundreds of things get intermixed and confused. So that's sort of my initial thought towards this.
Yeah. So we have an issue, and the issue number is 3763, where even the name recipe was sort of like first introduced. You can put whatever thoughts you want there. Look, with regards to its name. In order for us to sort of like acquire more feature parity with the respective features for D7 and D8, I think there's a few things that we need to achieve. And Tim, thanks for doing all that work and then open sourcing it for us. So there is a few issues that we need to solve in core, and we have issues for that. Eventually, I'm confident that we will sort it out. But the only way that I see now that requires less work, because that will require a lot of work, is these recipes need to be versioned as well, because as one person goes, they might be updating, right? So the only way that I see this happening, and this is in tandem with that, the title and the goal of that issue that I mentioned before, 3763, it says add recipe project type to Backdrop, which means that these recipes need to be at top level, the same way that we have modules, themes, layouts, they need to be another thing, which means that they need to have their own .info file, which solves one of your problems, Tim, which would be requirements, like module requirements. So I'm not sure how much work that would be, but that's one step that needs to happen, I guess.
Well, I'd like to move on to Peter. I'll just wrap up by saying, yeah, that's all true. I think experimenting with this in Contrib, you can get around the versioning and stuff by making the recipes not projects themselves, right? If it's just something for me to move a feature from one site to another, then we don't have to worry about that. But if we want to share those or like make feature or recipes projects of their own, then we have to deal with those issues. The last actually big issue that I met that to make this widely usable is an export. I've been working on the import, but I haven't even addressed export yet, right? So it would, in the features module, you can select certain config files, config, and then export it. And I haven't even got close to that yet. I mean, partly because exporting it isn't that hard, and that if I have access to my config file, I can just grab the files and pull them out. It's getting them into another site that's a little harder. But anyways, I'd kind of like to drop this, I think, and move on to Peter's thing. Okay, do you have a quick comment, Jeff or Gregory?
Yeah, the only thing that I recall that this, what you just mentioned, is a big pet peeve of Luke's.
Yeah.
He would, last time that we had the virtual group meeting, he mentioned that he would like to selectively, have text boxes and select which bits of configuration he would like to export. I think that we might have a way, like with the current interface, if we switch the drop down on the export thing to a select, like a multiple checkbox select, we might be able to achieve that. But then again, we will get into issues like dependencies and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's come talk about that later.
Yep.
Peter, are you ready?
Yeah, can go.
So Peter, you wanted to share, simplify, right? Or
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen and take over.
Okay. Alright, let's do that. Yeah, so Simplify is a module that was written for Drupal originally by a guy called Mark. I took it over from him and did a few things in Drupal and then ported it to Backdrop. I think it was back in 2015 or 16, so it's quite old in Backdrop even. But a few releases since then though. So it's something I just work on every now and then, but I've got it running on all of my client websites. And what it does is allows you to hide certain things from the user interface. So the purpose being when you've got like your client as like an editor or a sort of sub administrator, you don't want them to see everything, but you want them to have certain access. So you can give them access to certain things, but then hide other things to make it a bit more user friendly for them, so they're not bombarded with a whole bunch of options on node forms or stuff like that.
Peter,
so you
can I
read
interrupt
more
you?
about it.
Can I interrupt you because you're just a little hard to understand? Could you maybe speak up a little and maybe just
Okay.
slower?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So yeah, you can read about the module more on the project page, but I'll just do a quick demo, hopefully, of it here. So I've got a fairly standard backdrop setup. I've made a few changes from the default. So one thing is I've added another user who's an editor role, and I'll log in as him over here in a sec. So he like sort of is like the client that you sort of want to build the site for. And then I've done a few things. I've given him more access to stuff than what comes out of the box. So see if I can quickly show the permissions for the editor role. I've given him access to administer comments, upload images and stuff to the editor, administer menu items. I've done this one, administer content, because that's needed to access the vertical tabs on node forms, like the author, time and date and that sort of thing. So I've given access to that. So it doesn't come out of the box with the editor role. Administer paths, like aliases, stuff like that. So they've got a few more permissions than what you'd normally have. So if I flip over here and you can see Bob's logged in, and if you've got to create a page content type, you've got title, body, formatting options, which is kind of pointless, not much there. And then publishing options, authoring, all these different tabs that he can access. Now, some of these things you might want to have enabled for other roles or other features, but you maybe don't want your editor to have to see all this stuff necessarily. So going back to my admin login, I've already installed Simplify, which gives you this form here. This is like the global way of disabling things. So by default, when you first install it, nothing is disabled. So you just have to go through and choose what you want to hide. So for nodes, we can hide, say, the formatting options. This is one thing. This is, I think, the reason that I found and wanted to contribute to this module in the first place was just this formatting options section. Is I don't often like to have my clients need access to that because I think there's another module I use which sets the default value so they don't need to change that, and then I can actually hide this whole section. So they can't sort of change it off to something else. So you can hide that. I normally leave publish options on, obviously, in like make drafts and stuff. So I'll leave that, but revision information they don't need. So we can turn off comments. I'll leave menu there so they can like add items to the menu. But I'll turn off the other two URL things. And you can do the same with like user accounts. We'll have a look at that in a sec. But if I go and save this for now, and then I refresh Bob's screen, you'll see it's hidden a few things already there, and the formatting thing's gone from the bottom. So it just makes it like a bit cleaner interface, hides things that they don't need access to. And when I was looking into this to prepare for this talk just now, I realized that I had to turn on a lot of things in order to have stuff on the interface to then hide, because by default, backdrop hides a lot of stuff by itself, which is good. It means that this module is not as needed as it was in Drupal, for example. And I also realized that I probably need to update it because I saw the permissions for the file types, which we now have. So I haven't even supported that in this module yet. But if someone wants to go and do stuff in there, there's probably fields that I don't need to access there. So I can use some updates, but yeah, for now it does quite a bit. So another example is taxonomy. So if Bob wanted to add a taxonomy term, this is one thing that the latest update lets you hide this description field because I couldn't find a way of doing that, and don't know about other people, but for me, hardly ever do I need people to enter a description for a term. It's normally just used for tagging stuff, and you don't need a description. So in here we can go, and for taxonomy we can hide the description, and we'll just hide everything else. So let's save that again. So here's what it was before, like description field relations, which, I mean, again, there's not much point of having that. I mean, unless you need some sort of hierarchical taxonomy, then you don't really need this vertical tab. So I've saved the other one. So if I refresh this, then adding a term just becomes literally just entering the name, and that's it. So that makes it much simpler, I think, for editors if they don't need all the extra stuff. And in addition to having all this stuff done globally, so these things here will be hidden for all vocabularies. I've only got the one here, but if you wanted to not hide everything globally, then as an administrator, you can go to a certain vocabulary, and Simplify has options to hide them just for this particular vocabulary. And the same with content types. You can hide it globally for all content types. You can hide it per content type, like the page or post or whatever. And if I hide something globally, say the description, then when you come to configure stuff locally, you'll see that it shows that it's been hidden globally. So you can just choose these ones if you want to do that. So yeah, same for user account pages. So by default, they can see a lot of stuff there. I've enabled a few extra things like signature settings, URL redirect, stuff like that. But again, you can hide all those things. Like, so users, we can just turn off all that stuff. And then it's just the basics that they can see then. Yeah, and then there's also an option for administrators to hide fields from user one, because by default, this sort of text explains a bit, but by default with Backdrop's permission system, user one has all permissions. And one of the permissions is to view the fields that you hide here. Obviously you want administrators to still see those. I'll show you so here simplifies permissions, one of which is to view hidden fields. So you can hide fields everywhere, and then you can tell certain roles like the administrator that they can still see those fields. So by default, user one has the ability to view hidden fields, but if you want to test it, for example, because there was quite a few reports from people back in Drupal that, hey, this isn't working for me, then it turned out they were logged in as user one who could view all the fields, so they weren't actually seeing their changes to test it. So that option is sort of more of a testing thing, but yeah, if you wanted to do that. Yeah, I mean, more stuff can be added to this. Like I said, I need to add files to this now that that's in Backdrop. Yeah, that's what Simplify is, and yeah, interested to hear what you think or any questions or whatever.
This is a module I've used in both Drupal and Backdrop and really like, so thanks for working on it.
Yeah, I've seen the presentations of this module or screenshots from the Drupal version of it. And I'm not sure if it has all the features, but I saw some UX, details that were added, and kudos for doing that, especially things like having a link that takes you from the specific settings per content type to the global settings, things like that. So thanks for paying so much attention to details if that was not already implemented in the Drupal module.
Yeah, the Drupal one, it maybe has extra stuff that I'm not aware of because I'm not really into Drupal 8 development, but other people are. So there's another maintainer that maintains the Drupal 8 version. I've sort of still got maintainership of the Drupal 7 version, but I don't really do anything there anymore. It's mainly backup I'm focused on, but yeah, other people are now maintaining the Drupal 8 version.
Okay, which was my next point. Like, are you contributing back to the T7 version when you sort of?
No, I think I haven't done much with this lately, apart from just adding that description field. I didn't even think of putting it back to Drupal, but I think it depends. I'd have to check and see if some things I had to simplify for backdrop are backdrop specific, because backdrop does a lot of things differently now in the user interface, but I'd have to see what sort of how it compares and if it's necessary to port that
Fair
or not.
enough.
Okay, any other questions for Peter? Or Peter, any final comments?
No, that's all.
Okay. So we've got, I was prepared to quickly demo the configurable block styles module that Joseph and I have worked on. Joseph, please jump in if you want to say anything about it, or Doc Wilmot, you're here and we could talk about Fanciblock too, which is one of my other favorite sort of site builder Contrib modules that I think more people should know about. And I know neither of you are probably prepared to share your screen. If you were, that would be great. But I could pull up either of those modules.
I just stumbled on Fanciblock, and
Okay.
I really like it.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. As a new sort of Contrib contributor, I'm kind of new to this space. One of the things that I'm kind of like surprised about is, like, I want to hear from people. Are they using it? And we don't get much feedback. The config block styles, I think now has showed up to like 30 sites using it at times, anywhere from 15 to 30. Or the stats have been volatile, but like there haven't been any issues opened in the issue queue, or so it's like I don't know if people are using it. And I would encourage people, at least from my perspective, to just post a note. I've started to open in some of the config projects I'm working on, opened a topic that's called just general feedback, where somebody can just sort of like say, hey, yeah, I'm using this module. It's great. Thank you. Because there should be some place where people can just sort of say, yeah, this is useful.
All right, I was lost there somewhere. Where is that option? Is it on GitHub or the general feedback thing?
I have, in some of my modules, I've created a topic, sort of an issue, and called it general feedback, right? So I just open an issue and say general feedback, and I've like one or two projects, but I don't know, that might be kind of a good practice to do, especially if you want people, because people feel like they need to become complaining, right, in order to post something in the issue queue, and it's like, how else do you hear from them? So I'd like a place where they could say something positive.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I have a pretty bad cold, so I'm probably just going to stay muted. If you want to talk about configurable block style, that's cool.
Okay, I'm sorry, are you able to share a screen, or should I open it up and look at my screen?
Sorry. I don't have anything pulled up right
Okay.
now. I was actually in the middle of other stuff.
Well, I have it enabled on that site we were just looking at, so I'm going to share my screen again. Do you want to talk about it, Joseph, or should I? I'd love for you to do it.
I'm just going to stay muted. I have a really bad cough.
Okay. So the quick story of this module is that I was looking, so let me get this out of the way. You can see my screen again, right?
Yes.
Okay, and hopefully everybody can still hear me. So one of the things I've been really interested in is how to give a site builder the ability to customize the look of their site without touching CSS. And right away, it's like I wanted like a user to be able to create a block like this one right here, with a blue background and some words in the middle, and set the height, without having to write CSS, because this seems like a really common thing. And I was I don't remember exactly asking people about options for that. And Joseph said, oh, I've been working on a module that does a lot of that. And he shared it. And then I helped him get it released to Contrib. And what it does, so we can go, let's just add a new block. Let's go to custom blocks. Oh, I'm sorry, on our hero page, we can go to the home page. And in our hero region, we can add a block. Let's do a custom block and call it welcome. Well, we already have a welcome message, but we'll add another one. And actually, I maybe don't want a title on the block. We'll get to that in a minute. Welcome to this demo. And I guess we'll go ahead and show what the configurable block styles does is it adds under the style settings this configurable option. And we can open that up, and it basically, the additional CSS classes was there, but we have the ability to add a container class, the ability to use custom colors for background and text within that block. We can set the height, either a fixed height, a responsive height, or a fit background image. I haven't played with that option so much. I think Joseph must have added that. We can do some custom padding in our block. And actually, this is a dev feature that is not in the release, a background tint. If you want to sort of tint if you have a background image, you can tint it. This kind of conflicts with the background color up here, so we have to play with that some more. But anyways, let me just, actually, I'm going to turn this off for a second and just add the block. Oops, sorry. Save. And we got to go home. So we've just got this block here. So now if we go back to configure it, and we turn on the configurable, a couple of things we might want to do with this is put the content container so that the text will stay within the margins of our other text. Let's set the background color. And this is using the browser color thing. So I don't know, let's just go with a brown. Oh, it's a little bit, okay, that is selected, so why is that not?
You have to close the color modal in order for it to actually update.
I don't think so. No, okay, I just had to do it again. I don't know. It should update live, right? See there, it's updating live, but anyways. So we can add
that's my experience as well. It updates live.
Yeah, but first, I don't know why it wasn't working there for a second. And let's just change the text. Oh, you have to make sure that the thing you're trying to change is selected and it's a little sensitive, has been my experience. So, and you have to manually close the color modal. That's a little annoying. If you don't manually close it, it just hangs there. But now we can come back and save this. Anyway, so boom, there we've created a color background. We can also, I'm trying to, there we go. I'm not going to see anything special there, but we can like set the height. Let's say I want to indent that a little bit more and have a bigger block. So I can give it a fixed height, or let's do a responsive height and say we want it to range between 250 and 500 pixels, and we use a relative height. This is kind of a good default. You can change this, but it uses a VW setting in between the minimum and maximum. And we can add a little padding to the left and the right. I'm not gonna Actually, I will. So if we put 30 padding on the left and right, then it'll be indented a little bit. In theory, okay. I'm not seeing the indent. I don't know why, but we are seeing the fixed height, right? And we're seeing that it's responsive. It gets smaller down to the minimum size. Yeah, I'm not sure why the extra padding is not there, but I'll double check that later. Anyways, that's the kind of thing you can do with this module. We'd love ideas on how to, other things people would like to be able to do with blocks. You can use this block on one of the use cases for this is a hero block with a background image. What I would run into is if I would create a hero image with a background image and I didn't have any text in it, the block would automatically get small. And with this module, you can sort of make sure that the hero image stays at least 400 pixels big, or use that. Joseph, do you have anything to add?
I guess I could explain how the fit background image. So I was designing that so that I could upload arbitrary pictures to be the background image.
Oh, sure.
Without having to worry about their height and width and having the way it was scaling. So what that does basically is if you use the fit background image setting for the height on a hero block, it'll look up the picture you uploaded for it and figure out the aspect ratio of the picture by basically dividing the, whatever it is, the width by the height, and set that value as percentage height on the picture using like it uses a percentage of the width as the height so that it'll always show the full picture no matter what the screen size is.
Okay. I think you were trying to solve a similar problem that I was with the fixed height, which I just wanted to show more of the image. You wanted to show it all. So those are, it's a distinction, but it was getting towards the same thing. Anyways, I don't know if there's anything more to show on that module or if anybody has any questions. So we started a few minutes late, so we can go to a few minutes after 3, but I want to end this in about an hour, which gives us a little over 10 minutes. Does anybody just want to share any other Contrib modules? We talked briefly about Fanciblock. Maybe what I could at least do is really quick to show for Fanciblock. Let me just show the page. Actually, didn't I have it open? Yeah, here it is. Because the README file has some nice images. What it lets you do is create a block with like 3 boxes or 4. It's highly configurable, and you can put custom images in each box, or you can put an icon in it and have those icons link off to other things. And I find this to be like it's a really common design element in these, especially endless scrolling pages, is that you've got the 3 big icons that each link to different sections of your site. But that's not easy to implement from a site builder perspective if you're not actually doing the CSS without a module like this. And this module makes that sort of gives a site builder the ability to add that kind of feature really easy. So, and you can do I think you can do like background colors on the boxes and add custom text and make them clickable. It's a number of nice features. Doc Wilmot, chime in if you want to add anything about Fanciblock. Anybody else have any favorite Contrib modules they've been working with lately? No? Anything you'd like, any modules you'd like to see in Contrib? For those who aren't aware, we do have I might as well do this. It's backdrop ops/contrib, isn't it? Where we have.
Yep.
We have a issue queue on GitHub backdrop. Oops, backdrop. Is it ops? Must be ops with a
It's,
plural.
yeah, it's backdrop dash ops.
Backdrop/ops/contrib. There's an issue queue where people do request ports or even new modules. And I was a little skeptical when I first saw this issue queue that it would get any action, but I have come to see quite a number of people request things here, and within days or weeks see them, somebody port them. So if you have contrib requests, this is a good place to put them. And to talk about too, like I know Luke was just looking for feeds tamper, and so there is an issue.
I was about to say I was going to bring that around to the promise that I made at the beginning of the meeting to foreshadow the data import export thing, and what I've done with that so far is actually reviewed. I combed through every single contrib module looking for all the ones that had anything to do with getting data in or out of backdrop, and in general, I'm looking for general purpose data. So I wasn't looking for things that allowed you to, import tweets and like very specific pieces like that. I mean, there's a number of things like that, but in general, just the idea of like filling your site with stuff or getting it out. And my answer came down to feeds and views, and like not that much more besides that. So there's and it seems that in particular, like at the very top of my wish list for modules, based on what I've been looking at, trying to solve this particular use case, is feeds tamper, which is a critical part of the feeds toolkit for in Drupal world. So I've actually poked around, and Lauren, I guess, did a pass at that, but I'm just kind of curious. Just want to throw it out to the assembled experts here. How do you guys get information into Drupal? Do you start with empty sites, or I mean, most of the things I do, there's always a big block of content that you need to kick it off with. How do you fill your site with stuff?
Demo generate. That's fake data. So I'm kind of tongue in cheek there.
The develop generate, you mean?
Develop, yeah, I'm sorry, develop.
Right. Yeah.
I've used feeds before a few times, different projects, and I also used the feeds tamper module in Drupal. And I missed the beginning of what you were saying, whether you said it's been ported on to backdrop, but when I last used it, it hadn't been. But I found that I didn't actually need it because I ended up just using my own, implementing my own hooks and stuff in the custom module to do essentially the same thing, just tweak stuff after it's been imported. So I didn't find I needed it. I could do it myself. But yeah, I do use feeds a bit, and it's quite handy.
Okay, so feeds in combination with custom modules. I'm always advocating. I write modules, but I try not to. So yeah. I'm always advocating to try to find solutions that don't involve writing custom modules. And when I hear that, I tend to think, oh, can that be generalized so that custom module becomes a configurable contrib module that the people who aren't comfortable editing PHP code can make use of.
Yeah, well, I'm the same. I steer away from custom code when I can. It's like if should be a UI option for it, I prefer that. But at the last project, I can think of using feeds. It was like either port feeds tamper, so I could use that, or just put the same code I would have put in feeds tamper into a custom module, and it did the same thing for me. So that was easier at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, Luke, if your definition of getting data in and out of the module would include like APIs for moving data around, but Jeff might be able to say something quick about what we have available, because you have a headless module, right? That at least helps you get, I would assume that's at least exporting data through an API. Does it also help you get data in, or or not?
Not really. It just exposes the data. My one effort at importing and exporting information to and from Backdrop was the BN module, which basically works for simple out-of-the-box Backdrop sites, but needs a lot of work in order to be able to like detect WordPress data and detect data through reference fields like taxonomy fields and file fields and stuff like that. But yeah, and it's just a heavy lift in general. Like the migrate module in Drupal is very flexible, but it's also very complicated.
Like terribly so. No, I mean I always get, you know, FOMA from WordPress when I see their, you know, export and import you know, menu items. And I always wish that we had that.
Yeah, the BN module provides that, just like WordPress. It's modeled on the WordPress thing, but their advantage.
The BN module is that in? Is that in our Contrib thing, or I must have
Backdrop Contrib, yeah. But it only works for simple out-of-the-box Backdrop sites because WordPress out-of-the-box doesn't have any of these reference things that Backdrop and Drupal do.
Is your interest to transfer content between Drupal and Backdrop sites, like from Drupal to Backdrop, or in general?
More general than that.
Okay.
I'm most interested in transferring information from WordPress to Backdrop sites.
So just to cover both use cases, there was a couple. I think I need to remember the name of the modules. Staging, I think, or something like that. So there's modules in D7 and D8. I'll find them and share links, which would allow you to create a staging site, and it would allow you to stage content, as in you could create a separate instance where your customer would sort of like, we have this notion of vetted content here for government, as in content that is not ready to be released to the public yet. So they have their own special UAT site, they create the content there, and then they want to go live. The way that we have been doing this in the past is that we would forklift their database. Like when they're ready, we put some content phrase. Yeah. But these set of modules also provide like a module, a button next to the save button of each content type, which allows you to sort of like send the content to the production site. So you have save, cancel, yes. So, but this, I'm not sure if it has a bulk operation, as in create multiple content from the content management screen with checkboxes and publish all of that. So that's one case. And then the other case about bulk import, say, from non-Drupal sites or sources, I should say. So the company that I work for, if we have not already released, is about to release a generic solution that scrapes sites and then imports that into Drupal sites. Maybe we would, like, maybe this works for Backdrop out of the box, because I think it was built up to be CMS agnostic. The user interface for it is not open sourced, but you can actually write some script. So I guess it's YAML files that you write, you point source and destination, and then it does that in bulk for people that want to do migrations. I'm not part of or involved with that project, so I'm not sure if it's been open sourced yet, but it's in the works.
Well, I mean, those are definitely both related. Those are both much harder problems than the one I'm trying to solve. Like I'm perfectly willing to put a lot of limitations on the end users outside of Backdrop. Like the one thing I'm trying to get is I don't want them to have to open up a text editor. I don't want them to have to write a piece of code that can white screen of death view, right? Like I want something where the worst that happens is it doesn't import. And you know, that probably means that the input gets normalized to some collection of like CSV files or some other tabular input, and possibly, you know, possibly, standalone files. I mean, one of the things that seems magic to me about feeds is you can type, you enter into a spreadsheet the URL where it can get an image, and it brings in the image and properly puts it into place, which I always just found fantastic.
Yeah. So there's another module then that you would love when it comes to files, and it's called Stage File Proxy.
Oh well, yeah, no, I know that.
Which does the same thing. It basically pulls. Yeah.
And also, I mean, you mentioned the content staging problem, which I worked on a little bit early on in sort of the Drupal groups, and again, I mean, the work I did with Accenture, that was very, very interesting. It was something we desperately wanted, but couldn't really deliver. And if these things came about, if we're able to solve, I mean, those are kind of more advanced use cases of the basic concept of getting large amounts of data in and out. But I just wanted to at a base level for this just solve that basic question, and then worry about the harder ones. How do you spell BN? Or can you send me a link to it?
So yeah, if you open the chat, Jeff, before he moved out, he provided a link to it.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So this is always what you just mentioned at the back of my head as well, especially after I watched the Dries note in the last DrupalCon, where he mentioned that how they evaluated or should I say rather interpreted the stats about the community sort of like decrease, I would say, in Drupal, is that WordPress is really easy to start with, and I'm not sure if we will ever be able to beat them in that case. But as developers start to learn, or site builders, I should say, then they find certain things limiting. And the opposite happens with Drupal. It's very hard to learn, but once you sort of like get the hang of it, you say, oh, yeah, now I see the beauty of it because it has structured content and everything. So I was wondering how we could capture that audience, which starts with something simple like WordPress, and then at some point they reach a point where they want to do more magical stuff, and then they discover Drupal or Backdrop in our case. And this audience, I'm assuming, will already have some sites that they have in WordPress or whatever solution that is that they have. And the easier we make it for them to migrate those sites to Backdrop, the easier it would be to have adoption rates go up.
Absolutely. And I want to actually put in sort of another piece. The export from Backdrop is an important piece of this too, because one of the things that strikes me, I'm approaching this from the marketing perspective. One of the things that strikes me as a barrier to people wanting to try Backdrop is the fear they would have that if it doesn't work, they're screwed, right? So I want to make it very safe. I want to make it so that export is so easy that they feel comfortable spinning up a project in Backdrop, knowing that if it doesn't work, they can get out and end up with all their data in a way that can be easily imported to the next system, so that they give it a try. And then we want to make it so that they don't feel the need to leave. But we don't want to lock the door. We'll be like, the door's open anytime you want to go. You're not forced to stay.
Do we have anything like views export for Backdrop yet?
Yeah, there is.
That's what I use in Drupal.
Yeah.
I haven't used it in Backdrop yet, but I use that a lot to export data, and it's pretty powerful. It's not
views export is kind of and currently the bulk of my talk was going to be import stuff with feeds, export it with views export, somebody port feeds tamper please. But I mean the problem with views export is that, and it's actually a problem with feeds too, is that it tends to be kind of incremental. Like I really want something where it can take all the nodes, all the taxonomies, all the users, like just some way where you can stack it up, set it and run it and let it go.
Yeah.
I think that not being able to do that is
Yeah,
is
we don't have a
big
we don't
impediment.
have a packaging system like that, and I'm not sure in what format the WordPress thing is being exported to. But because they don't have all these, our content is being saved in multiple tables, and there's references from one table to the other. Whereas my understanding is that WordPress has a more simplified database, like where I think they have a single table for everything.
A little bit. I mean, it all comes out in an XML file. But hold
Yeah.
on. I feel like it's not that far for us because of CMI, right? So what I'm envisioning is something where when you export a backdrop site, it first exports the CMI, which describes all the structure that's going to be there, and then keeps spewing like all the data that fits into that structure that we just defined. And then you could take this list of like CMI plus content,
Yeah,
and feed it into something else. And the CMI stuff comes in and creates the structure, and then all the data flows in.
I think if
And
you
then
try to
then
export
crack a
it,
beer.
yeah, if you try to export it in XML in a format that other CMSs will understand, it will be really hard because you would have to have some sort of mapping what goes where.
Right.
And again, from my understanding, WordPress just has a single content type. It's a page.
Yeah.
Especially now.
Well,
especially now.
They have
yeah.
page and post. They've
Yes.
got the two content types.
And especially now with Gutenberg, everything goes in there. Like we have separate fields. So the only way that I see the easier way for the target audience that you just mentioned, people that don't want to get too deep into Drupal lingo or backdrop lingo and understand how things work, they just want to get the data out, is the headless module. Because the headless module exposes, I'm not saying that they will not be required to do some, scripting, at least if not coding. But what it does, it exposes all the content on your backdrop side in a CMS agnostic form, like in a JSON sort of like format, an XML format that other things can consume. Yeah. You can, like, the intended usage of the headless module is that you create a backdrop site to hold all your content, but that content can potentially be consumed by, say, an Android app or an iPhone app.
Right.
So I haven't used it. I just know the theory of how it's meant to work. So maybe if you give it a play, maybe all we need after that is just documentation and how to do what you just said before.
Yeah, look, I think actually if you take the API delivery format of the headless module and just write it to a file.
Oh yes.
You kind of get what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So
I'd like
Jeff
to.
is not. Yeah. Sorry.
I'd like to end the official meeting, but I'll leave the room open so you can keep talking. But it's been an hour. Let's wrap up the official VUG. Thanks everyone for coming. Please ping us in Gitter, Zulip, or on the forums if you have ideas or feedback on the VUGs. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the stop live stream, and then you can keep talking.